The more untethered to reality a discipline is, the more ideological it is, and the more the goal is to forward narratives and not falsify hypotheses. And so the problem with that is that you fall down a rabbit hole of mass delusion, because you then think that the ideas that you've generated in these peer-reviewed journals are the gold standard for knowledge. But what you've really done is you've created an echo chamber when you've extended the confidence and the belief beyond the warrant of the evidence. And then it's kind of a circular thing, because the self-justification of that is the journal itself.
Welcome to the Shape of Dialogue, Peter.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming to New Zealand.
It's a great place.
Yeah, you've come a long way.
Civilized.
Yeah?
Peaceful.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, I haven't tried the public transportation yet, so I can't say, but I'm a big fan of public transport. That's one of the reasons I like Budapest, because you just get around anywhere you want, and you buy a monthly pass and it covers everything, and it's so clean, efficient, easy, safe, runs, as far as I can tell, all hours of the night. So I would need to live in a place that I wouldn't want to have a car. And it seems to me, from what I've seen, because I've been staying in the CBD, the Central Business District, you can walk to everything. It's just great. It's peaceful. I've been walking at night. It's just great. I love it.
Great. Fantastic.
I'm a big fan of civilization.
and New Zealand seems like a civilized place.
Highly civilized. I haven't felt unsafe, threatened, or anything since I've been here.
Right. Well, that's cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming all this way.
Well, I love it. Yeah, thanks for having
great.
me.
It's great having
thanks
you here.
Thanks for the Free Speech Union for sponsoring the tour.
Yeah, they've been amazing. And we had
they have been amazing, yeah.
Yeah, we had a great night last night.
It was a good crowd.
Yeah.
Sold out. We sold out.
Yeah.
So it was good. Nice people, nice questions, fun event.
Yeah, great. Well, that was my first Shape of Dialogue event, so hopefully it'll be one of many. Yeah.
Oh, good. Right on.
So
good
we hit it out of the park.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So we're here to discuss a few things.
Anything you want.
Anything I want. Well, I thought we'd start with a clip which I'll show in a second.
Okay.
I'll cut that in. But it's from the current Minister of Justice, Paul Goldsmith.
We met him last night.
Yeah.
I had dinner with him.
Yeah, it was cool.
Well, yeah. I mean, New Zealand went from a subsistence economy in around 1840 to one of the highest living standards in the world by 1900. Amazing transformation, how we grew our economy and became a prosperous society, one of the most prosperous societies in the world. That's a great story, interesting story.
That prosperity was very unequal, though, wasn't it?
As it is everywhere in the world. And a big part of our story has been how we've tried to ameliorate that and through the development of the welfare state. Wonderful story. A big part of our story.
Hey, just to stay on history for one moment, you wrote in an opinion piece in 2019 that on balance, colonization was a good thing. The good outweighed the bad. I'm just wondering, is that true for Māori?
Everybody will have their own opinion.
What's your opinion?
The reality is that New Zealand was isolated from the rest of the world for centuries, and at some point it had to reconnect with the rest of the world, and that happened in the 19th century. It was always going to be a very traumatic experience. With it came all sorts of wonderful things, such as literacy, such as the freedoms and democracy that have come through. So, yep, it's good and bad.
On balance, colonization was a good thing for Māori.
I think on balance it has been, yes.
And a few years ago, he was asked whether colonisation was a net benefit or a con for the indigenous Māori population in New Zealand, and he said it was a net benefit.
Okay.
Now, one of the questions you posed last night was whether things like colonisation and disparities in outcomes were due to inequitable systems. And I think that all relates to what Paul said. So what are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, okay, this is a big topic. So there's the first idea of colonization, whether it's a net benefit or not, and then there's the idea of Ibram X. Kennedy's every disparity in outcome is due to systems. So let's take a look at colonization. So Bruce Gilley, the canceled, despised academic who happens to be a personal friend of mine, we were colleagues at Portland State University, and in spite of our rather extreme metaphysical differences, we have profound agreements on other things. I had him on the show too. He wrote a piece, The Case for Colonialism, published in the Third World Quarterly, and people lost their minds. They just went fucking crazy about this. Like, they literally went just insane. And they had petitions to have him canceled. Not only canceled, but not only fired, but there was a petition to have his PhD revoked. That's why I say, like, it was like a kind of madness. They lost their minds. Thousands and I think it's 8,000 people signed one of the petitions. But anyway, he makes the case in The Case for Colonialism. There's another piece that predates that called Three Cheers for Colonialism. You have to kind of think about what the net benefit and what the net positive is. So if anybody wants to read more, I would suggest his work. And
what's his name again?
Bruce Gilley, Gill.
Right. I'll put the
put a
him in
link
the show
to his
notes.
book, and he
Yeah.
subsequently published more things about colonialism. But there are many ways to think about it. One more a pedestrian way to think about it is people vote with their feet. So during colonial times, even King Leopold, who is by every standards a complete lunatic, like he'd chop off your hands if you didn't get enough palm oil or coconut. But
He was the Prussian leader, wasn't he?
I don't know. This is way out of my area of expertise. But the idea is that people went to regions and areas which were colonized as opposed to their own regions which were not. So there was a kind of, was it good? No, but it was the one argument was better than, right? Better than what was extant in those communities. But there's something more.
Well, sorry, what do you mean by that? Better than?
Well, people vote with their feet. So if they don't want to live there, they just go to the area that's colonized. So it's not up to me to think it's better. It's what they thought it was better because they moved.
I'm confused. You're saying the Europeans went to Africa or went to New Zealand? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying the people who lived in colonized areas in Africa, the people in Africa, when certain regions were colonized, the people who were not in colonized regions moved to those colonized regions.
Right.
So, in other words, that evacuates any concern that we would have that we were imposing some kind of myopic vision of what we would want, because that's just like what they would want. And he provides the statistics and the data in subsequent things that he's written. But again, this is outside my area. I'm just saying that's one way to think about it. And so you would either have to repudiate the method of data collection, or you'd have to somehow show it was wrong or biased, or I don't know.
Wouldn't people say that they didn't have any choice?
Well, that just would. I mean, they can say anything they want, but that would be false.
I'm sure that's what they would argue. They would say
no,
that,
but they wouldn't argue it at all, because they don't argue, because they have moral convictions and impulses. They're like simians, and they grunt and they groan, and they say, "Oh, good, bad."
Yeah. So there's no dialogue.
No, that's correct.
Right.
They're incapable. They're literally incapable of dialogue. Because if they were capable of dialogue, then they would play by the rules of engagement. They would publish a piece in the Third World Quarterly saying why the idea was bad. That's how we've done it in academia traditionally. That's the rules of engagement. That's what we do. If you don't like it, then you defeat someone's argument. It doesn't have to be in the Third World Quarterly. I mean, it doesn't have to be in the same journal. It can be in another peer-reviewed journal.
It could be on the Shape of Dialogue.
No, it couldn't be on a podcast,
Okay.
because the original venue is a peer review, so it'd have to be something in peer review. So then you then start a line of literature in which people, the best minds, try to falsify the arguments coming in. Like, that's the rule.
Yeah,
That's what we do.
Yes, but that's in academia. But I'm
Right.
Just in general. I mean, I've tried to get people.
They won't come on.
Yeah, my original premise of the podcast was to have a diversity of opinion.
It's not
so
possible.
if someone says X, I want someone to say Y.
It's not possible.
And the efforts I've made so far, they won't reply, and then when you ring them, they just say no.
How do you know the emails weren't lost? That's what I get
Well,
from people. How do you know the emails weren't lost? Well, okay, you can make shit up that's into Crazyville, or you can say there are some people who literally won't talk to you. But that's part of the game that they do. Part of the game that they play is, I was talking to Konstantin Kisin about this. Part of the game that they play is, because you can't get people who advocate for certain positions on your show, you're somehow right wing. And then the very people who wouldn't go on your show after you invited them repeatedly will say, well, why would I want to go on a right wing podcast?
Yeah.
But the problem is it's endemic to the identitarian left. It's not endemic to the left. This is a unique character of identitarian leftism. This is unique to it. leftist Noam Chomsky, et cetera, he's a pro-free speech, and these guys are going to go on. And, there are some people like Destiny who moves in the public space, and there are other people like David Pakman who will have people on his show with whom he has substantive disagreements, but overwhelmingly this just not happen. And there are reasons for that. Look at the many people on the left think even talking to someone, the identitarian left think even talking to someone on the right is a kind of ideological contamination or pollution. But we didn't get back to the other question you posed about the colonialism, which I think is important. If a society has been around for 50,000 years, and if you notice in Australia, for example, the amount of time the indigenous peoples have lived on the land increases every generation, and it's not because of better data, it's because of deeper ideologies, more entrenched ideologies. It's not a good thing that a society remains static for 50,000 years. It's not a good thing.
Why not?
Have you ever had dental pain?
Yes.
Okay, well then I don't need to continue, do I?
Basically, I mean, in the Stone Ages, the tools didn't change for like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And so they
why is that good?
And say in Egypt, they were just an incredibly conservative culture for thousands of years.
I don't know if you call it conservative, but
conservative,
stagnant. I would call it
stagnant. Whatever word you want. So things didn't change. Well, what's wrong with that? Are we predicated on progress?
That's such a. I don't know if it's a monstrously stupid question, but it's such a.
Just to be clear, I'm playing devil's advocate. I would like to pronounce it. I am playing devil's advocate.
Okay, well, I mean, for example,
but yeah, why not?
Advances in medical technology.
Can I just say why
alleviation of poverty? Yeah, go ahead.
Why I've asked that question is because I have literally had people say to me, when I have said, it's progress is better, just medical progress is going to alleviate
is the amelioration
suffering.
of human suffering good or bad?
Yeah.
Is lifting people out of poverty good or bad?
I have literally said that to friends,
yeah.
And they have said, oh, well, indigenous people aren't interested in that. And so that's why I asked that question.
Indigenous people aren't interested in the alleviation of physical suffering?
Exactly. People have said that to me. Not quite in those words.
Okay, well, if they're not interested in the alleviation of physical suffering, what do they do when they break their leg? Do they just, or why would that would mean they'd be completely indifferent to any kind of pain or suffering?
Yes, but they would argue that we're concerned about those sort of things, but indigenous cultures aren't. Because otherwise,
that's the most patronizing,
I agree,
demeaning.
But they would argue otherwise they would have changed and they would embrace Western, or maybe I should use the word international culture and technology.
Weird societies.
Called. To explain that.
Okay, so let's.
There's
a lot running on in this conversation.
Yeah, no, we got to really getting offline.
Okay, so. Okay. The idea that some people would not want to fix their suffering. I mean, embedded in the word suffering is, I don't like it, it is not good. So that is the most insane. Find me a single example of somebody in the third world or the global south or whatever you want to call it at this point, whatever term you're most comfortable with, who's indifferent to their own suffering. I mean, suffering by definition means you want to alleviate it. So anybody who would say that is almost excluding themselves from rational discourse. It's that is actually a racist attitude. Everybody, for all the people claiming all these things are racist that are actually not racist, thinking that because someone has a certain color skin or is a tribal person that they don't care about their own suffering. I mean, that's completely insane. That's like something a crazy person would say. Only we, the Western people, we have enough wherewithal to be concerned about wanting to alleviate suffering. But these poor people, they're fine with their own suffering. They don't have enough, wherewithal to. No, that's just deranged. I mean, nobody should take that seriously.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I've had a number of people say that to me. So,
well, I would argue they have nothing of substance to contribute to the conversation. I mean, why not just make ape noises?
my point is that I imagine that's quite a big part of the population, cohort of the population. So it's not just, I wouldn't say it's one person. I would say that is to use your term, what is it, the identitarian left.
Yeah.
I think that would be quite prevalent. That, again, in New Zealand, the previous government was trying to instantiate Mātauranga Māori, which is traditional Māori knowledge, into the put a Mātauranga Māori valence over the whole education system.
Right.
And in particular, something I've worked hard on in changing is in the science curriculum, putting Māori mythological concepts into the biology and chemistry curriculum.
That's insane.
Nothing short of insane. But roughly half the population voted for Labour.
Well, I mean, I don't know what it is in the United States, but roughly 25, roughly a quarter of the percentage of the population in the United States thinks the sun revolves around the Earth. So, I mean, there are certain people who just are not qualified to make this. I mean, why not put astrology into the curriculum? Why not find some tribal group in the middle of nowhere who believes that instead of teaching about gravity, that someone put their finger on the Earth and that's why things fall down? Why not teach that?
Well, when I interviewed Richard Dawkins, I proposed this to him. Why don't we put the Holy Spirit into the biology curriculum?
Jerry Coyne, they've been talking about that for a long time. But there's something more fundamental going on in the conversation. So my next book is about this. It's that the means of error correction have been disabled. So one of the reasons you get stagnant societies, you can look at it mimetically, but one of the reasons you get stagnant societies is because there's an inability to correct errors. So it's not a good thing to be stagnant for X thousands of years. You want to grow and flourish as a civilization. And anybody who would say that's a racist idea
is racist.
Well, they would have to be.
Yeah.
Because it's strictly, so, well, I mean, we could have a whole conversation about just that idea.
Yeah. Well, just going back a step, you talk about stagnant societies. I think there's something worse than stagnant societies that go backwards. For example, you're talking about the Aboriginal Indigenous people of Australia.
Yeah.
That when they arrived in Australia, they had the bow and arrow. And then when the Europeans arrived, they didn't have the bow and arrow. So technologically, they'd actually gone backwards. And so what my fear with all this stuff, like in the education system and that sort of thing, and we can talk about other things like medical schools and nursing programs, my fear is that we're actually going backwards rather than being stagnant.
We, meaning who, Western societies?
Well, I mean, I can only talk to New Zealand. I'm sure you've got cases in America. So all I'm saying is you're talking about sort of error correction, so we don't remain stagnant. But I'm saying we also need error correction so we don't actually go backwards. Because if we abandon things like, science,
that's called a sticky meme. It's called a sticky meme.
Yeah,
so there are positive sticky memes and negative sticky memes. So a positive sticky meme survives because the method of error correction has not been disabled. A negative sticky meme survives because the method of error correction has been disabled.
So how does error correction work in our society?
Well, you can look at Popper's work for this. You can look at David Deutsch, the Oxford physicist, work for this. You could look at Brett Hall, the popular Australian science explainer, his work for this. Error correction works because we attempt to falsify hypotheses that come down. One of the things I agree with you with what you said about the stagnating or going backwards. We see that in the peer review process where falsification isn't normative now in the peer review process. Seeing that certain narratives are forwarded is normative, and so especially in the more untethered to reality a discipline is, the more ideological it is, and the more the goal is to forward narratives and not falsify hypotheses. And so the problem with that is that you fall down a rabbit hole of mass delusion. right? Because you then think that the ideas that you've generated in these peer-reviewed journals are the gold standard for knowledge. But what you've really done is you've created an echo chamber when you've extended the confidence in the belief beyond the warrant of the evidence. And then it's kind of a circular thing because the self-justification of that is the journal itself. So I agree with you. I think that's the case. We've gone backward in a sense, but the difference between, I can't speak to the Aboriginals and the bow and the arrow, but we've gone backward because the method of error correction has been disabled, and the peer-reviewed journals think it's become institutionalized, and they're purchased by university libraries, and they're taught to undergraduates, and people publish, and entire lines of literature are built upon fiction because the method of error correction has been disabled.
So it becomes a religion in a sense.
It's a religion. Yeah,
there's a holy scripture
without people knowing that it's a religion without people thinking it's a religion, because they think they have sufficient evidence and they point to the peer-reviewed articles. But the whole thing is a mass delusion, where society is under multiple mass delusions now.
So,
and it's just so obvious to anybody who thinks about it for literally a minute.
Yeah, I've been told, and I've no reason to doubt it. I haven't researched it myself, so if I'm incorrect, please forgive me. But at Auckland Medical School, half the entrants have to be of Māori origin.
Okay, so we'll see what will happen.
So is that a great thing? Is it surely that's a good thing for Māoridom in general, because it allows pathways for people who normally don't have those opportunities to become get involved in professions.
Only if the competence outcomes are the same. If the competence outcomes are dissimilar and worse for the Maori, then you're going to create a kind of system in which people are not going to trust Maori doctors because they think they've been affirmative actioned in.
But that would be racist, wouldn't it? If you didn't trust Maori doctors.
Why? Why would it be racist as opposed to what the system would be? The system has created the disparity in outcomes.
Yeah. I'm just,
I know you're tongue in cheek, but the system would have created the disparity in outcome. And again, this is not complicated to think of. Anybody who's honest.
But it must be a good thing, because these people who run the Auckland Medical School, they're not idiots, surely. They're
ideologically captured. They're not stupid people.
Right.
I mean, they know what 7 + 5 is, but they're ideologically captured.
Sorry. But I'm just fascinated. Obviously, that is an absolutely insanely stupid thing to do.
But
because one of the most important things in our society is healthcare. Without healthcare, we're screwed.
So I'll play devil's advocate. It's only the same thing if you care about health outcomes.
Right, and who would want to care about health outcomes
when it comes to hospitals?
Yeah, what would the point of that be?
So the other thing is that Heather McDonald writes about this extensively. She's from the Manhattan Institute. She's American. That what people don't understand who listen to this, and they're like, "What are these two white dudes talking about?" Is they don't understand the degree of the disparities. If they knew the degree of the disparities, they would not be willing to throw away the meritocracy.
Right.
But, if that's what they want to do, I wish they would. I wish there were 100% of doctors who are Maori, and then I'd love to see the dead bodies pile up. No, but that would be the only way the system would maintain a correction mechanism, is for people to suffer and their loved ones to die. There's no other way.
It must be happening in real time right now.
Well, the other thing is, then, what they would say is, this is just white racism.
Well, I've actually, if I know someone I know very well, works at Auckland Medical School, and this was probably about 10 years ago. I was talking to him about it. He's a lecturer there, and he was saying, because I was bringing this up because at the time it wasn't quite as extreme, but there was a portion held for Māori, so they you didn't have to get A pluses. So if you're Asian or white, you have to get A pluses to get in. It's mind-blowingly hard. I mean, I know many people, many young people who haven't got in who are just insanely smart and would be fantastic doctors. But if you're Māori, you, again, I don't know what the mark is, but you have to get a lower mark. But he said, oh, look, well, the first year is actually, it just means it's a foot in the door, and the remaining years aren't, it doesn't really matter. So he was sort of saying it functioned well.
It's just the wrong way to think about it. If you want to, you're trying to think about it in terms of an outcome, to jerry-rig an outcome. What you should try to, I would suggest, what again was completely obvious to me and any sane person who's thought about this for literally 60 seconds, is that the way to, if your goal is to advance Maori and make more Maori medical, if that's your goal, I'm not saying that's what your goal should be, and I'm just saying if that's your goal, then you have to provide everyone a quality of opportunity by giving them public schools of the first rate.
I would totally agree.
That's not
that's
because you're sane.
Yeah,
only crazy people would think that we're willing. They either think we're willing to sacrifice health outcomes to have more Maori. Okay, just be honest about it, because we know that's what's going to happen. Or they think there won't be a difference in health outcomes because they're more Maori. And it's not because they're Maori. It's because they got in because they weren't as qualified as other people, independent of their race. So Maori is really a proxy for something else. But those people, even when they see the disparities in outcomes, they will not say, well, maybe this was a bad idea. They will have to blame it on something else, some kind of systemic disparity, the problem of whiteness, patients don't like Maori, or because it is a fundamental, it's a childish, jejune lack of honesty.
Jejune? What's that mean?
It's just like a kind of like a boyish childhood, like silly, not serious.
It's utopian.
Yeah, I guess that was further than what I was thinking, but it's more that I often marvel that the stuff I do is just so stupid. Like all of the stuff I talk about is so stupid. It's just an enormous waste of my time. It's an enormous waste of any person's time, because everybody knows what a woman is. I'm going to pull you up on that. Not the previous Labour Prime Minister of New Zealand, and not the Supreme Court Justice of the United States, Brown. But okay,
these highly eminent pillars of our society actually don't know what a woman is.
Okay, well then,
even though they,
so it's fascinating to me. The Supreme Court Justice doesn't know what a woman is.
She's
deciding
what's
on
her
sex
name?
change. Kendra Jackson Brown.
That's
She's
right.
just deciding on sex change cases. Well, how could she decide on sex change cases if she doesn't know what a woman is? It would be literally impossible. No sane person, literally nobody who is sincere and honest, would genuinely believe that culture plays no role in the educational process. No sane, honest person. You would have to be so ideological. Just think about the number of priors that you would have to believe to lead you to that conclusion. You would have to have a level of derangement and delusion which is unfathomable to those of us who do not suffer from it. These people are either have a mental disorder or they're pathological liars. There's no other alternative.
I think there is, actually. I don't think, like, the people who've said things like, we've talked about today, to me, are intelligent people. They're not pathological liars. I think what it is they...
Well, then they have some kind of a disorder.
No, I don't agree.
Okay, then what is it? Explain to me how somebody could believe, with total honesty, that culture and the way you're brought up has no
I'm not talking
influence, like Ibram X. Kendi has said, and systems are entirely responsible for disparities in outcome, like on the SAT scores. Explain to me the process that would take for someone to believe that.
Well,
I will now listen.
Sorry, I agree with you on that point, but I was talking more in a general point, why people, dare I say, it's people on the left, it's generally not people on the right, they say these things, people have said these things to me, and I don't think people have thought it through properly, sort of from first,
I don't believe
first principles.
that. I don't
No.
believe that.
And but the other thing is, I think
I don't believe that.
I think the main thing is everyone around them is thinking it and saying it. So it's very hard. It takes. I mean, you know what this is like. It takes a particular individual to say something outside of the Overton window of their friend group.
But you're just making my point. So they're lying.
Well,
So
I don't think it's lying. I think they actually believe it. A falsehood that you articulate is not a lie if you believe it.
Okay. This is now veering into the idiotic. You mean to tell me? I mean, it's just so. I don't even know if I want to take the time to talk about how stupid this is.
I agree with you, by the way. I agree with you. But I do,
So
what
you
I'm
mean
saying
to tell
is,
me that a kid who grows up in a musical family is not more likely to be musical than anybody else?
I'm not.
You mean to tell me that a kid who grows up watching his father or mother or what have uncles fix cars is not more likely to be curious about cars or more likely to know how to change their own oil? I mean, if any other principle in any domain is operative in culture, why wouldn't that be operative if you come from a bookish family?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. But where I'm disagreeing with you is I don't think people espousing these sort of identitarian ideologies are stupid.
I didn't say,
and I don't think they're lying.
Okay.
They may be wrong. Like there are many
Okay.
things that I will articulate that are probably wrong, but I'm not lying when I articulate
It's not
them.
that they're stupid. It's that they're ideologically captured.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's an Overton window in which they live in, and their friend group, their community, their whole milieu is in, and it's very difficult for humans to actually go outside of that and to be the black sheep within their family, within.
But that's you're just making my point that they're not honest.
I suppose we're possibly disagreeing about word choice. We totally agree, but
I guess it doesn't take any intellectual effort to see that at all.
Then, well,
you
okay,
just
if you're
need to
right,
observe your friends.
But if you're right, why don't they see the light then?
Well, because they're either dishonest or they have a mental disorder. I mean, just look at the number one factor of whether or not someone will become an MD is if their parent is an MD.
Yeah.
And they want to deny genetics. Okay, we don't get into that conversation. So then you're telling me that that's systems? If that were true, then you could just look at other economic groups that prospered and there'd be an equal number of physicians comparable to whether or not your parent was a physician. But that's just not the case. Again, this is not complicated. This is so simple. You don't even have to be intelligent to figure this out. You just have to look.
I totally agree with you, but people aren't looking.
Where they want to belong to a group, and they want to get the privileges of benefits, and they want to show you how virtuous they are. And again, I don't want to. I think we're going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because then they're just dishonest. I mean, you really mean to tell me people don't know what a woman is? Really? Like, you really mean to tell me?
Well, our previous prime minister couldn't answer it in public.
Okay, so he. So in the case of the Supreme Court justice, so that's like theater, right? So she knows what a woman is, but she knows she wants to get confirmed. So she was lying.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
fine.
was he.
Okay, so
he sleeps with a woman, so he must know what a woman is.
Okay, so he doesn't want to sleep with you or me or some young guy, I assume, if he's straight. So he knows what a woman is.
Yeah.
Was this turf in the streets, something in the sheets or whatever? But so they know what a woman is.
Yeah.
So they're lying.
I agree.
So
I agree with you.
We have a large number of pathological liars who are lying about a lot of things, many of whom occupy government positions, and everybody else, or not everybody, but most people are afraid to say that they're lying. Well, I mean, of course they're lying.
My point, I suppose, is they can't say they're lying because then
liars
they
don't say they're
won't
liars.
get invited to all the cool parties.
Well, liars don't say they're liars. Oh, you mean the other people?
I'm saying, like, so the previous prime minister, he said that if he'd said anything, if he'd actually said what a woman is, he would be disinvited to a lot of cool parties.
Okay, well then then he gets the respect he
what,
deserves.
what about Neil deGrasse Tyson? Have you heard what he said about?
Well, I have heard what
I mean,
he said.
I mean,
and he's
you know, I've
that's
been
Colin Wright and others have debunked that.
I have been a massive follower of that guy. I even went to see him, drove all the way down to Wellington to see him last year, and I'm totally shocked.
Okay, so you can be really good at something and a moron at something else, or ideologically captured something else. You can be a really good astrophysicist.
He's a scientist.
No, he's an astrophysicist.
Well, he's a scientist, and he's espoused the benefits of science and being a science popularizer.
He is.
But that's my point. I think he's a classic example. That's my
Okay.
point. Are you saying he's a liar? Are you saying he's an idiot?
He's ideologically captured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's not an idiot.
No, I don't.
be way
I've my dealings with him have been very limited. I'm operating the assumption that he's a good astrophysicist. But just because someone is a good astrophysicist, that doesn't mean that they're a good, concert pianist.
Yeah. How do we know we're not ideologically captured?
We probably are.
Right.
We probably are.
So how do you get outside of your own bubble?
Ask yourself what it would take to change your mind.
What
Talk
would
to people who
it take
disagree
for
with
Peter
you.
Boghossian to change his mind?
About what?
About all the stuff we've been talking about.
Evidence.
About what a woman is.
Evidence.
Right.
It's pretty simple. I mean, all this stuff is, again, it's so stupid. It's like, I was telling Lee the other day, I constantly marvel at how idiotic all of this stuff is. And it's just,
Completely agree.
It's just,
The biggest waste of time.
it's a perfect, and I'm just like the little kid who said the emperor has no clothes, and everyone's like, oh my God, the emperor has no clothes, the emperor has no clothes. So it is frustrating, and now that it's become easier to criticize this insane, asinine, it's not merely stupidity, it's asinine stupidity, I'll use it as an adjective. All these people are coming out of the woodwork, and making criticisms about things which are, it really is a type of grifting at this point.
I would completely agree with that. Follow the money.
So everyone's, now that it's easy, well, where were you? Like, I go to some of these conferences sometimes, and I'm just astonished at all these people who are so smug. They're so smug that now they're criticizing this. Okay, were you criticizing this years ago when there was a cost to pay? It was a costly signal in a sense.
Right. But in a sense, that's a good sign. I mean, most people, dare I say it, are sheep. So it's a good sign that these sheep who were on one side of the ideological fence are now shifting. Isn't that a sign that there's sanity is getting back to some sanity?
If they shift because they have good reasons for shifting, as opposed to the ideological wind shifted.
Well, but that's my point. I don't think people believe what most people, and I have to include myself in this. We don't necessarily believe it because we know it. I mean, there's not much stuff that I actually know, like from the ground up. Most of the stuff that I actually know, most of my epistemology is just borrowed, and so if I've borrowed it from the wrong place, it's going to be wrong.
Most people who accept the facts of evolution couldn't tell you the first thing about evolution. It's just kind of a...
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
They're just... I know.
That's what I mean.
I'm making your point for you.
Yeah.
I'm supporting your point. Yeah. So you asked if it's a good thing. I mean...
It's a good thing in terms of what you're advocating for. The more people that agree with... the more people who disagree with insanity surely is a better thing, whether they believe it or not. Whether they're just they're grifters who are just moving, to where the wind's blowing from.
I guess at a non-trivial level, it's pretty quotidian at this point. It's kind of become commonplace to make these criticisms, but ideally what we want to move toward is a society in which people have good reasons for holding the beliefs that they hold, and not that they happen to capriciously or just fall into a belief that it kind of lubricates society.
Is that realistic for human beings?
Sure. That's what the Enlightenment is.
Is it realistic on mass?
No, sure. If you have strong institutions,
So the institutions have to be based in reality. Reality, as you know, to use Jonathan Rauch's term, reality-based institutions.
Oh yeah, from the Constitution of
Yeah,
Knowledge.
yeah. I interviewed him, so people can look that up. And I suppose that's what you're saying. Our institutions, from government down, universities, schools, all sorts of, now the nursing, I just heard this last night, the Nursing Association are requiring essentially nurses to acknowledge that, in their exams, to acknowledge that the indigenous population of New Zealand has suffered from, I can never say the word.
Colonialism?
Yeah, colonialism.
What does that have to do with nursing?
Well, obviously everything, Peter. Yeah. You obviously,
Well, that's what happens at...
otherwise it wouldn't be in there.
Yeah, it was kind of facetious, but that's what happens with wokeism or critical social justice. It's a universal solvent that destroys the mission systems of institutions. It just corrodes everything. While you're laughing, it's totally true.
Well, I've got a definition. I'll see what you think of this. Critical social justice is the process of redressing the past by making the future substantially worse. What do you think of that?
I think that would be the case if you look at it in terms of people who held power and people who didn't. But it will not only make the future worse, but it's also some kind of guarantee of the future being worse, because, for example, like admitting Maori into physicians, or it doesn't have to be Maori, unqualified people.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
you've done is you've destroyed the meritocracy, and the moment you destroy the meritocracy, the outcomes you want are not the outcomes you're going to have.
Well, in a sense, civilization is predicated on people who can do stuff well. As soon as people can't do stuff well, civilization will collapse. So when I go to the dentist and he, drills too far and causes a lot of pain or whatever, that ain't a good thing. And if you extrapolate that over...
But many people want the civilization to collapse. That's why they want to destroy the meritocracy.
So okay, that's an interesting question. So in this identitarian ideology, is it revolutionary in the sense they want to burn everything down? And why would they want to burn everything down?
I mean, the French Revolution. They want to burn everything down because they think that the systems of power are oppressing minorities. That's why they want to queer things. They want to make things different. Keep laughing, but it's true. I mean, it's the whole thing.
It's just so stupid.
It's just so stupid. The whole thing is so stupid, and I would really love to have some of the people who bought into this pretend, because now, again, I've said this 1,000 times, but now everybody's going to pretend that they never believed in the first place. There's just massive gaslighting. Yeah. So I have just no time and no space for any of these people in my life.
I recently met a new German friend of mine. He's a philosophy professor in Germany, and he was telling me about his experience with his parents and uncles and aunties and things, all involved in the Nazi Party. Uh-huh. And so, the previous generation were involved in the Nazi Party. Uh-huh. And I said, well, what happened afterwards? What did people do? And he said, well, they basically pretended it never happened.
Well, of course they did.
Yeah. Because why would you?
Yeah, of course they did. That's what's going to happen now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's already happening now.
Now, if I had a magic wand, and put you in charge of the education system in America, what would you do?
God, that's like dirty talk to me. It makes me so happy. A lot. I would do a lot. I would destroy the accreditation cartels.
What are they? Tell me what they are. What is accreditation?
So there are 8 accreditation bodies. They're regional. Trump tried to break it up the first time. He did okay, but he just didn't have the large-scale support. He was fighting off battles from
what are they accrediting?
Immediate sense. Basically, they're the stamp of approval for colleges and universities to say, aha, well, you've been accredited, you've met certain benchmarks, we've gone through your grades, your teacher credential certifications, and you've lived up, so we give you the stamp of approval. So I would destroy those. That's probably the second order of business. The first order of business is to destroy colleges of education, to completely raze them to the ground, so that the accreditation mechanism.
They are teaching teachers, places that teach teachers.
Yes, and they give teacher certifications.
Yeah.
They must be completely razed to the ground and utterly destroyed.
What are you going to replace them with?
Why would they have to be replaced with anything?
So how do we train teachers?
Show me a single study that says that a single study with a large N that's rigorous in its methodology. I was just talking to Rob Kramer and Lyle Asher, two Americans who move in this space, about this. Show me a single study that shows that the outcomes are better for students if the teachers have teaching certificates. I'm waiting.
Well, that is really interesting. My career was 40 years teaching music in a private practice.
Okay.
So it wasn't attached to any school or anything, because I'd be hung and drawn and shot, I think, in an institution. But I never had any training, and dare I say it, just from the quality of the students and how many students I had too many students, so I must have been doing a good job, right? And I always thought, well, hold on. It's not actually that complicated. If you've got a small semblance of intelligence and an inquiring mind.
No, it's not particularly.
And it's something you actually learn on the job. That's actually how you learn to teach.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I had this, one of my previous positions, I would evaluate teachers, and I could tell, literally within moments if they were going to be any good.
Exactly.
If you're engaging, and then you look at grade variance and grade distribution. There are a few external metrics you can look at, but so I would, with my magic wand, I would completely raise all colleges of education and delegitimize them. The next thing I would do is I would go after the endowments of every single university, and I would tax them all. I would tax them into oblivion. I would find my next order of business, I would find any institution that is systemically, because there is systemic discrimination, and it's against Asians. I would find all the institutions that systemically discriminate against Asians.
Just explain that a bit, because
Asians need higher SAT scores than the whites to get in.
So it's racist.
Well, of course it's racist,
okay.
yeah. And the appellate courts have found it to be racist. So what I would do is I would literally take the entire endowments and divvy it up to people who were denied admissions to Asians who were denied admissions to those universities, and I would sue them into oblivion. I would use the complete mechanism and arm of the United States federal government to take the endowment after it is taxed and distribute it to all the people who were systemically discriminated against on the basis of their race. I would completely end the university system as we know it, and they had no one to blame but themselves. The people screaming about land acknowledgement and systemic racism were themselves systemically racism. It is the racist. It is the iron law of woke projection.
Iron law of what?
Woke projection. And I will tell you that the sledgehammer of justice I would bring to these institutions would be absolutely unremitting.
Sorry, just got to take a moment. Well, I suppose all I can say is I hope you get the job.
Well, thank you. I'd like that.
I think you're the perfect person to do it.
Thank you very much. I don't think that no matter what they think is coming for them, it's not enough.
Can I get an invitation to the stonings?
You can get an invitation, because then I'm going to fire myself after I've done what I need to be done.
So who's been appointed?
Linda McMahon is the Secretary of Education.
And so what's her pedigree?
Well, she it's funny, she's been criticized because I actually think she's a great person for the job. Truly, truly excellent. Mm-hmm. One of the criticisms is that she's a billionaire. But who else?
Oh my God, that's a terrible thing.
But who else should run?
It's shocking to actually be successful.
Yeah, well, many people in the Trump administration are billionaires, but who else is going to manage $1 trillion deficit? $1 trillion budget? Do you want to hire guys who've worked at convenience stores for managers of $100,000 budget? No, I mean it's a bizarre criticism.
It's as if being a billionaire is a bad thing. It's axiomatically bad.
Yeah, well, but the other thing is she worked hard. She got into position. She ran a $1 billion entertainment industry.
What's her
she
knowledge
has-
of education?
From my understanding, so first of all, let me just be crystal clear. I've never met her. I don't move in those spaces. I don't know her husband. I don't know her on a personal level. I know that she's been heavily involved in primary education and less so secondary education. And I know that she has a profound understanding of what Trump wants to do, and she's completely on board even before she was, you serve at the pleasure of the president. Even before she was tasked, she wants to return power of education to the states. I mean, look, since it was formed in 1979 by Jimmy Carter, state test scores, student test scores in education have gone down in math, reading, science across the board. So, I mean, what could it? I mean, it's actually arguably it's made things worse.
We have the same story. New Zealand used to be second in the world in terms of education outcomes, and now we've fallen like off a cliff basically. Yeah.
Well, you have diversity now. Now they know about gender markers, so there's that. Now they realize you can be trapped in the wrong body and should have your genitals mutilated. So you got that in return.
So what's she going to do? Do you know?
I haven't spoken to her. I don't know her plans.
Yeah.
I'm sure that she's going to. My guess is that she'd keep those at least initially until Trump was.
Maybe another way of putting it, do you know what Trump's policies are on education?
Yes.
So what are they?
Well, the main thing is to sunset the Department of Education and return control to the states. That's
Right.
the primary mission. 4,200 employees who work there. They will. Some of those.
They won't be working from home anymore.
No, they won't. Only 1% must tweet it. Only 1% of people who aren't maintenance or security come in 40 hours a week. But back to the Department of Education, you'd have to divvy up some things like Pell Grants for poor kids. Like there are some things that you'd have to find other agencies for. I tell you, one of the things that nobody's talking about that I find super interesting is what are you going to do with the building space? That's just even the building space. I'd love to see those numbers on like what the expenditures and the cost would be to maintain that and what you're going to do with it. Especially if Trump wants to take a lot of federal employees and disperse them throughout the country to quote unquote drain the swamp. I mean, I think that's a great idea. I also think it's a really good idea that what DOGE wants to do with Vivek Ramaswamy and Musk. And I think if they are successful, and I think they'll be successful, I want to talk about that just for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that you'll see these movements to have DOGE in other countries. So I find this like super interesting. So Bernie Sanders is an inveterate leftist, incredible leftist pedigree. Like literally nobody would say that this guy is not like hardcore lefty. So Sanders has been screaming for years about the military, the defense budget, etc. Now Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy want to do another audit of the Pentagon, and I think it failed 6 or 7 audits so far. Bernie Sanders said, this is great, we have to audit the Pentagon. And what do the people to the left of Bernie do and his people on the same barrel? They go crazy on Bernie. How dare you? It's just so rank partisan. I mean, it's like anything Trump does. If Trump's just like, oh, the sky is blue. No, the sky, we can't have, we need to cut government waste. No, we don't. We need more government. I mean, it really is a conspicuous partisanship. And when a guy like Bernie Sanders is assaulted for wanting to deal with Pentagon waste, I mean, really think about that. That's profound. So that's the situation in which we're up against in the United States. And I would be lying to you, as much as I try to make this not political, if it were not for the far left. It is the far left. Think about this. Really let this percolate. The far left does not want the Pentagon, does not want DOGE to succeed in auditing the Pentagon. The very thing that the far left has been screaming about, I'm 58, in my whole lifetime that I can remember. Now they want that to fail. Oh, they don't want that. So these people...
Because the wrong person is saying it.
Right. These people,
that's simply...
They're like your friends in the Maori. Like, these people have no place in adult conversation. They should write fiction or sell peanuts at a stadium. I mean, nothing wrong with people who sell peanuts at a stadium, but, a garden in the back, your garden in the public space or something. But they just cannot be taken seriously in any adult conversation. I mean, they're just naked, vicious ideologues. I mean, who in their right mind argues for more government waste because you don't like the guy at the head of the thing?
Yeah. Here's a question. Has the craziness of the left created Trump, or created the space for Trump?
Obviously.
So you could blame the left for Trump. Is that what
That's
you're saying?
the least of the things you can blame them for.
But just specifically talking about Trump.
Sure,
Right.
I'm more than happy to. When I was in,
I mean, are you just to be clear? Are you have you always been a supporter of Trump? Are you a supporter of Trump? Do you hate Trump? Do you love Trump? Where are you?
Okay,
did you vote for Trump?
Let me answer your first question. So your first question was about the left creating Trump. So when I was in Hungary in 2021. I had dinner with one of the government's main critics, which interestingly, that meeting was set up for me by someone from the government. And the guy is super famous critic of Orban. And he told me one of the reasons that he hates the identitarian left in Hungary is that they've given Orban something to be right about. The far left gave Trump a lot of things to be right about. Like a lot of culture war things, but even forget culture war, even forget, the trans stuff, the trans women's sports, even forget all of that stuff. They handed him something to be right about the border. They handed him just a suite of issues to be right about, and they didn't need to do any of it. They were just held hostage to the lunatic progressive wing of the party. I mean, these people are totally deranged. They have no evidence at all for any of these things. They won't participate in conversation, like you said at the beginning. And yet the far left, the identitarian left, made Trump.
Just on that border thing, I saw a video
That's a huge issue.
of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
She
was
from like 10 years ago.
She wanted them to be deported.
And it could have been Trump saying it was word. It was like Trump had just copied the words down and said them.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's how far things have changed.
Well, yeah. I mean, and again, I'm not. And just look, to be clear, it's completely reasonable to change your mind if you have a political position and the evidence comes in. And you're like, well, listen, I used to believe this, but now I have this evidence about illegal immigrants coming through the border, and they're, Colorado, and they've done this and murders, and great, I've changed my mind. I mean, that's what sane, rational people do. But now to criticize Trump so I don't think that those criticisms are sincere. I was just shocked. I watched that debate, like many Americans, between Biden and Trump, and I knew that Biden suffered cognitive decline. But I genuinely did not know how severe that was. Like, I watched that, and
I don't believe you, because everyone was saying how cognitively sharp he was.
I know, everybody.
I mean, all the media.
Joe Scarborough. I've never seen a guy with such facility with facts and figures and statistics. And Keith Olbermann and all these people are coming out saying, "Oh, this guy's."
And it was just obvious. I mean, I'm in New Zealand, and I can work that out.
Yeah, I forgot the point I was going to make.
Sorry, you were talking about that. You watched that debate. And
I can't remember. I lost the point.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So, just to be clear, are you a supporter of Trump, or I suppose you don't have to say, to be totally honest?
I want every single thing that Trump is doing. Well, I don't know about every single thing, but from the things that I know that are in my landscape, I not only do I want him to succeed, I will absolutely, unequivocally do everything in my power to help him succeed.
And you'd come from a left background originally?
I used to be very fond of saying I've never voted for a Republican in my life.
Yeah.
I don't think cutting government waste is a left or a right or a conservative little thing. And anybody who says it is has a problem. I mean, that's like fucked up. There's no polite way to say it. It's just fucked up.
Yeah.
So do I want Trump to succeed in that? 100%. Do I want him to succeed in his educational aspirations? 100%. Do I want him to succeed in a wide variety of other policy measures? 100%. Those are outside of my purview. They're outside of my area of expertise. But I think right now he's the man we need for the job, and there's just no question about it. If the Democrats had run somebody else, that would have been a really interesting conversation. But they didn't. They ran somebody who it was not only more of the same, but it was more of worse of the same.
I mean, would you agree that she's the worst candidate? Well, she's the worst candidate I've ever seen on either party.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's
I mean, she
dull.
couldn't even answer questions properly.
I couldn't.
So why would you?
could
Why would
almost
you
not
do
have
that?
invented a worse candidate, or someone who's really just.
But why would you do that if they weren't
You're
serious
asking
about winning?
the wrong guy.
They weren't serious about winning.
Many people, actually many people on the left, people on the far left, I'm crazy about, have given some really wonderful, like Cenk Unger, which I disagree with him about, well, actually almost everything, but I think his analysis has been just fantastic, like
Right.
absolutely spot on about this. And if someone's right, then it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if
exactly.
you buy into some. I mean, you just have to say this is a good idea. I don't agree with this guy on a lot of things, but he's right. So I think that's one of the things that many on the left don't
I
have.
think that's a good point. We have to get better at agreeing with each other, even if we don't agree with the person saying it, or 99.5% of what they're saying. We actually have to say,
Yeah.
look, and because what I find, I will often not say that I agree with person X, because I know if I say that, people will misinterpret it as if I'm supporting them. That's
Yeah, well, that's the thing about, like, if you look at the people Trump has on his cabinet, like, wow, these are like legit smart people who also have some kind of animus against the institutions they had. But that really is we need that given the extraordinary waste and corruption. I mean, I think that we've seen that. So many people might not like the swamp or the deep state. I was hoodwinked by the Hunter Biden laptop thing. Many people were hoodwinked. We didn't understand the degree of the ideological capture of institutions that we trusted, like the FBI, the CIA, NSA. I think that was very surprising to a lot of people, not even on the left. The willingness and ability of people to out and out lie about things. And I think that Trump is the, I don't want to say cure, because that makes it seem too permanent, because I don't have a crystal ball into the future. I don't know what's going to happen. But right now, he is certainly the person we need to stave off the demise of the republic. I've often thought it was really interesting that in the presidential debate, the vice president's debate, nobody talked about the deficit. I've been screaming about the deficit. Peter Thiel's been screaming about the deficit. Elon Musk has been screaming about the deficit.
It's only $32 trillion.
Yeah, I mean, it's scheduled to go up $1 trillion in the next 100 days.
Yeah.
And so if you look at those trend curves, they're
100
shocking.
100 days, $1 trillion.
Yeah,
so and $1 trillion's a big number.
Yeah. I mean, $1 billion is 1,000 million.
Yeah.
So that to me, when I was growing up, like abortion was one of the big voting issues. The debt to me was one of the big voting issues. I don't think people understand when that goes from the fourth largest spending item on the interest on the debt to the third to the second. Like, we were going to be spending the majority of our money, or at least in not the mode, but the number one item we're going to be spending on is the interest on the debt. So someone needs to fix that, and Milei in Argentina is trying to do something about that. He's brought inflation. I mean, again, I don't have a crystal ball. It's going to remain to be seen what other variables, happiness index, crime indices, what, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody knows about Trump, but he's offering a solution that he is not even in office yet, so how could you know? But he's offering a solution about things, and he has really, really smart people to discharge those things. So, I want to do everything I can to support that and make sure that happens. And I would say that no matter who's in office, because I genuinely believe in many of the things that are within my purview that he wants to do.
Okay. Well,
you've been laughing most of our interview.
I suppose one thing I just want to say before. You go on about how insane, you're dedicating your life to toppling these crazy ideologies, and what a waste of time it is.
Truly.
How I look at it is most generations, maybe not all, but most generations have always had to go to war. And in a sense, this is our war. It's not a hot war. But it's an ideological war.
Yeah, but you don't even need the ideological war. All you need is to maintain the method of error correction. The means, as long as the means of error correction are in place, the whole system will. Political correctness.
If it was that easy, we wouldn't be having these issues.
Well, that's because we disabled the method of error correction.
Well,
that's why we're having the issues.
I agree. Personally, I think classical liberals have let us down because they were asleep at a critical time. They didn't train the next generation to believe in these things that actually work.
No, that's not how classical liberalism works. You don't train people to believe in things. You don't even show people the evidence to believe in things. So if Reed were here, he'd get mad at me for talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So we know that there are certain things in combat arts that work. It's pretty simple. It's not complicated. And it's an experiment that not only have we run over and over again, but we've run probably, billions of times a day. Like any city like this one or Auckland, we've run the experiment 50,000 times, maybe even 100,000 times.
What's the experiment?
Well, to just
things
see,
that work and don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
To just see what works, right?
Yeah,
I mean, so you try to punch a resisting opponent in the face and you see what happens. So one of the things that we've learned, and this is something I've been thinking about recently, my good friend Matt Thornton, who wrote The Gift of Violence, said that all styles will collapse in a cage. Like over time, someone who does Taekwondo or whatever it is, and the reason that will happen is because a style is a style because it has certain rules. Like, we only slap people in the face, or in Taekwondo, we don't punch people in the face, but we can kick them in the face or kick them in the head. But when you remove those mechanisms, what you've done is remove the mechanisms of error correction. But when you remove the mechanisms of error correction and have very basic rules, like don't gouge anybody's eyes and stop when somebody taps, then all styles will collapse into one style.
The style that works.
Correct. Because that's what happens when you have methods of error correction in place. All we need to do to stop an ideology from overrunning society is just make sure the means of error correction are in place. Islamic countries, by and large, don't have that. Desecrating on the Quran, apostasy, fines, penalties range from fines to death. That stops the means of error correction, so that causes a stagnant society. You have to maintain the means of error correction. So it's not about believing in the principles of classical liberalism. It's about maintaining those mechanisms that allow the society to flourish. And you will either flourish or you will die.
Well, that's actually what I meant. I probably didn't put it particularly well. But the previous generation, which did have rigorous processes of error correction, somehow they let that slip and they didn't teach that to the next generation.
Or they were cowards, or they just, one of the things that we've seen now is the crisis of cowardice. And I just have no patience for that.
Mm. To finish off, at your Auckland event with the Free Speech Union, you talked about freedom of speech as a proxy for error correction.
Correct.
Just drill down on that for a minute or two.
So there are multiple reasons why freedom of speech is important. Cognitive liberty, freedom. I would say it's really freedom of expression, but freedom of speech is part. Mm-hmm. It's a subcategory of freedom of expression. So freedom of expression is like, what kind of clothes you want to wear, how you want to fix your hair, or what have you, how you want to express yourself, kind of dance, or what have you. So the main reason that freedom of expression is important, I would argue, I've been talking about cognitive liberty for years, very important. I was talking about freedom, period, very important. I'm not going to demean those or deny those. But the ultimate reason is that it allows you to correct mistakes in your thinking. It allows other people, it affords them the opportunity to correct mistakes in their thinking, and it affords the entire society the opportunity to flourish. And the moment that you take that away, you get stagnant societies. You get the Maori. You get other societies that don't have the fruits of the Enlightenment and don't have, for example, really good dental care. I mean, to me personally, if you ever suffer from tooth pain, as I mentioned, it really does come back to that's like the most practical of all the examples. Like, how's your dental care? Like, have you been in pain? Yeah, nobody's going to the witch doctor when they have extreme tooth pain. They're going to the dentist.
Sorry, when you said like the Maori, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's just something that comes over again. Like,
do you mean pre-European Maori, or do you mean?
Yeah, well,
you're talking about sort of pre-scientific societies in general.
Well, I'm sitting in New Zealand. That's why I have no animus against the Maori. I'm just sitting here, and I hear constantly this idea of indigenous ways of knowing. If indigenous people know something,
I just want to I think we need to separate the ideology from the people, because
Maori ways of knowing.
Not all Maori enamored by
if
some
you
of these crazy
if
things.
you want to put the qualification in, I have no problem with it. But there is no Canadian geography. There's no French algebra. There's no like Maori way of knowing. If the Maori have some like plant that is an analgesic against or whatever, then that becomes part of the canon of knowledge. Then we subject science and error correction to what that process is. But there's no specific way that if you're Maori, like that you know something. Like, I don't know something because my grandparents were Armenian.
Well, knowledge is universal. True knowledge is
that's
universal.
David Deutsch's idea. We're universal explainers. Right?
Yeah. It's going to be. Gravity. Gravity is on Earth and on Mars at the same time.
Correct.
It's not like there's no Martian gravity.
That's correct.
That is proprietary and particular to Mars.
That's correct. And if an indigenous tribe, and there have been. I'm thinking of the example of the Kung. I'm thinking of examples where people have discovered certain tribal herbal medicines, and then we know we've incorporated those into the body of science because we've used the method of error correction, science, hypothesis testing, and then those become part of the canon. But that doesn't. There's no like genetic marker for like, this guy has this configuration, so he found. No, it's just culture, trial and error, but we can apply the tools of science to those things. And so whether you're Maori or a midget or whatever, it doesn't matter what you are, you still have access to the tools and the fruits of the Enlightenment. It doesn't matter if you're blonde hair, blue. These things are just totally, they're exogenous factors that are utterly irrelevant to what you're talking about.
And the beautiful thing about the tools of enlightenment is that anyone, anywhere can use them.
That's correct.
To positive effects.
Some of the best physicians by independent metrics in the UK are from India.
Of course they are. Yeah.
So, the whole idea that this is somehow some Western enterprise is just nonsense.
And they haven't been led into medical school with a C or a B. They've got in there with an A+.
Well, yeah. So, again, that gets back to our previous discussion. Look, there are ways to throw the entire society into a cesspool and help it stagnate, and we've been doing a pretty good job in that the last 10 years. But all you need to really know is one thing. Actually two things. You need to know how memes work, but all you really need to know is don't block the road of inquiry. Is just keep because once the road of inquiry isn't blocked, then the method of error correction is in place. And once the method of error correction is in place, it gives you the tools to allow you to flourish. And if you don't flourish, if you're not moving forward, you're either moving backward or you're stagnating. And so there's no, this myth of the noble savage or something. This myth that, everybody is great. They lived in harmony with the land, and they just sat around, fucking all day, and everybody was happy. I just have little patience with these ideas. Well,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, but we better stop here.
Okay. Yeah.
I could talk all day to you, but we've got a timetable. So, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
You've been a massive influence on me.
Oh,
so
thank you. I appreciate that.
It is an amazing honor and experience to actually be able to talk to you in person.
Appreciate that. I sit like this because I have a bad shoulder from jiu-jitsu, not out of defensiveness, so I fold my arms. But yeah, thank you.
And fantastic having you in New Zealand and everyone at the event last night.
Cool.
Loved it. So yeah.
Appreciate that. You can find my stuff on YouTube, Peter Boghossian, Boghossian. I'm on X or Twitter, Peter Boghossian, same spelling, Boghossian. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. I don't even look at that. But
I'll put all the links in the show notes.
All right, man. Thanks for having me, Michael. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool.
To help the Shape of Dialogue grow, please subscribe, like and comment and share it to all and sundry. Many thanks.